What's on the menu for today? Well, today I'm making vegetarian enchiladas. They come out pretty terrific, kind of like that. Oh yeah, that's the stuff right there with sweet potatoes, onions, peppers, black beans, corn, other stuff. It's just deliciousness. And you're gonna have to check it out because it's really good. Here's how we make it. This is a crazy good recipe that I found that I really like. And I start off by getting some sweet potatoes ready. And the sweet potatoes make a nice base for it. They give a lot of texture and a lot of flavor. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel a bunch of sweet potatoes because what I'm gonna do is roast more than I need and save some for later. I'll have them with some other meal. Maybe I'll just serve them up with something. They're really good that way. I'll go ahead and just dice them up and make them into little squares, and I'll season them and I'll put them in the oven, and they'll come out really nice. And then I can use them for this dish and some other things. So I'm using a lot more sweet potatoes than I need in that case. Once I got them ready, I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil, and I'm actually going to add a little curry powder. Now, curry powder traditionally might not be in a Mexican dish like an enchilada, but I think it works well here. It has the cumin in it that kind of brings out a little flavor, and it makes the potatoes just a little bit more tangy. So I'll go ahead and put them on a parchment-lined baking sheet and then get them in the oven, and I'll bake them at about 375 degrees for about 25 minutes. It probably will take a little longer, probably closer to half an hour, but I'll put them in for about 25 minutes and then I'll check them just to see how they're doing. And now it's time to start getting our sauce ready. I'm going to start with some tomatoes. I'm going to use canned tomatoes, and I'm going to put them in the Vitamix so I can actually blend them up. You can use a blender or any other tool you like, but I like the Vitamix. It's very easy that way. I'm going to put some vegetable stock in there. I'm going to put it in with where the tomatoes were so I can use the extra juices that are in there, get anything out of the bottom of the can, and go ahead and put that in there. And I'll put the rest of my veggie stock in here, and I'll use that. Now I'm going to add some flour because the one thing about it is it needs to thicken a little bit. Now the alternative is I could make a roux and actually use the roux as my base. Wait, wouldn't I be better off making a roux for this? And what is a roux anyway? A roux is quite simply some oil and some flour that you mix together. You put them in the pan and you just heat them up for about 2 to 3 minutes so they come together as sort of a thickening agent that when you put a liquid in it will actually thicken it up. It's actually a really clever idea. The roux is a really nice thing to have, and if you just do it for a couple of minutes, you get this nice thick batter basically that you can use. But I'm going to go ahead and use the flour in the blender this time. I think that's probably good enough because I'm going to heat it for a while anyway. Now for the spices. I'm going to put in some chili powder, a little bit of chipotle, a little bit of cumin, and some garlic, salt, and that should pretty much round it out. Now you can add some other things to it too. I'll go ahead and put the full ingredient list down in the description below, but that gives you an idea of the things that I'm going to put in it. I like to have this come a little spicy, so I go a little heavier on the chili powder and a little bit on the chipotle, so that way I get a little more bite when I make it. You can make it as light as you want and change the spicing a little bit to make it a little bit less spicy if you prefer it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and put everything in there, just get everything in my Vitamix here, and once it's ready I'm going to blend it up. What I want to have is a nice smooth texture to it. So I'll add the rest of my spices and we'll go from there. All right, I'm going to put the lid on it and go ahead and let it start blending up. I want a very smooth texture because I want it to feel nice when it goes across the top and look really pretty on it. I think that food should have a nice look to it as well as taste good. So we'll go ahead and do the blending here, and when it's ready I'm going to take it off and put it in the pot. Now if I had made the roux in advance, I would have added this to the roux and put it on a low heat to just let it thicken. Because I didn't make the roux and I put the flour in it, I'm going to have to let it cook a little bit longer so the flour actually starts to thicken it a little bit more. So that's fine. I'm going to let it cook for a little while I get my other ingredients ready. No problem there. Now as for the filling. I like to start with some red peppers and some onions. I think those two make a very nice base for it. The onions, if I use a Vidalia that's a sweet onion anyway, it's going to give it a really nice flavor. And the red pepper adds a little something to it that just gives a little extra something. I don't know what it is exactly, but the red pepper just adds something. If you prefer, you could use a different kind of pepper. You could certainly use a little zucchini if you like, or something else. It's your choice entirely what you want to do. You could use roasted red pepper if you like too, which might have a little more char to it, or maybe even a little pickled red pepper. That might be good. So I'll go ahead and I'll cut these up. I'll cut up my onion next. Now you could use a red onion if you prefer here too. Red onion would make a nice flavor in here as well. And you might use a little bit of cooked red onion, a little bit of raw red onion, just to give it a little bit of a flavor contrast. It's entirely up to you. Now I have some roasted corn that I had made recently that I have a little bit left. I went ahead and just cut it off the cob, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to start preparing all my filling in one pot here. So I'll use that. I'm going to put some green chilies in it. I think the green chilies add a little extra something. They give it a little spice and just a little bit of that sort of tanginess that goes along. It's another kind of pepper. So I'll put that in there. If you wanted to, make this your own. Like I said, you could use zucchini, you could use mushrooms, you could use olives, you could use anything else you like to put in here. I'm going to use black beans because I think the black beans add a nice amount of protein and also give it another texture. I think textures are very important in this, so you have to add some different things to it. So we're going to go ahead and set this aside, and we're going to get started on the onions and peppers. Those I want to cook a little bit up front so they get a little bit more flavor. The onions I want to caramelize, make them brown, just cook them for a little while, and the peppers I want to soften. And I'm also going to throw some garlic in here along the way to give it just a little bit more flavor. I like to have these bold flavors as I'm going through it. You could certainly add spices as you're cooking it too, just to give it a little bit more flavor if you wanted to, but I'm happy with just using these different flavors and bringing them together. So I'll go ahead and put my onions in and let them start cooking, and I'll hold on to my red peppers. I'll put them in a little later. So I'll start sauteing them. They'll saute for probably about 7 minutes or so. It goes on for a little bit as I'm trying to make it and give it a little flavor. As I said, I want it to have that sort of caramelization, so they're a little bit sweet along the way. I'm starting with a sweet onion anyway, but as I leave it in the pan, it's going to get even a little bit sweeter. Next up, I'm going to put some garlic in. A couple of cloves of garlic will do this. Again, the amount that you put in is really what you want. You're going to put enough in there to fill a couple of different types of tortillas. I'm actually going to fill 2 trays of tortillas because we eat a lot in our house, but it doesn't have to be that many. My sweet potatoes are ready, so I'm taking them out of the oven. You can see them there. I'm going to set them aside and we'll get back to them in a couple of minutes. Now I'll put my red peppers in there, and my red peppers are going to saute for a little bit just to get them a little softness and a little bit of texture in them as well. And they'll sweeten just a little bit because they're cooking with the onions. So as you can see, everything's getting nice and cooked. The onions are getting slightly brown, which is what I want. So now I'm ready to take this off and add it to the rest of my mix. So here I can put it in with my beans and my corn and my other vegetables, and I'll just put them in there. And as soon as I get all this in there, I'm going to go ahead and add my sweet potatoes too. Now I've got my filling. This is what I want to have for my filling. Everything's going to be in there together, and I can start filling my enchiladas. I just get a good mix on it, and we're ready to start assembly. To assemble, I'm going to take one of my baking dishes here. It's got a little depth to it, and I'm going to put a little parchment paper in it so it doesn't stick. Because the one thing about it is if you don't put the parchment paper, everything will stick to the bottom, which is a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in like this, and then just put a little bit of sauce in there, and just to give it a little flavor on the bottom. And I'll go ahead and take a flour tortilla like this, and I'll just put a couple of scoops of my filling in it. Then all I have to do is just fold it over and put it inside my dish. That's it. I could use a little more filling. So we'll go ahead and put it in there. And I'll just repeat the process until the whole thing is full. So it's just a couple of them going through. Just keep putting them in until it's all the way filled up. All right, now that I've filled it up, I've got 5 of them in there. All right, I can go ahead and put my sauce on top. Now I'm going to just sauce them up and get them ready. And I'll get a second tray ready. And on this one, I'm going to put some corn tortillas. Now corn tortillas are notoriously a little more fickle, so you have to work with them a little more. So what I do is I actually dip them in the sauce, and that way they fold up nice and easily, they get a little softer, and I can work with them. So they're still a little bit of a challenge to work with, but they're just a little bit easier to work with when you dip them in the sauce. I have some white corn and I have some blue corn I'm going to work with here, but I dip them in the sauce, fill them the same way, and then just roll them the same way. These are a little smaller than the flour tortillas, but I can just put a bunch in there. So I'll just go ahead and fill this tray up as well. Same thing, same basic principle, it's just that they have a different tortilla shell on the outside. Yeah, it gets a little messy, but you know what? it's well worth it. It's kind of fun to play with your food a little bit sometimes. So I'll go ahead and fill them up. Once I run out of the corn tortillas, I'll go back to the flour ones just to fill out the rest of the tray and use up the rest of my vegetables. So I'll go ahead and fill that up, and I'll put some sauce on top of that, and then into the oven they go. I leave the oven on at about 350 or so, and for about 10 minutes or so, they're going to cook. And once they're done, I will take some of them out, and I'm going to add some cheese. I just have some queso blanco I'm going to shred on top of it, basically. I'm only going to do about half of them because some people in my family don't like cheese on them, some do, so I put some cheese on half of them or so. And once I've got the cheese on, I can put them back in the oven and continue cooking them. So they'll go back in the oven for about 5 minutes just to melt the cheese and make them kind of toasty. That's all we're looking for at this point. So we'll just wait for a few minutes and they will be ready. All right, here's what they look like when they're done. They look terrific. The ones with the cheese melted look really beautiful in a way. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some cilantro to the top. I like a little cilantro kind of on my dish. I think it makes something really nice. So I'll go ahead and add some cilantro to it. It also makes it look pretty nice too. When you look at it, it has sort of a beautiful look to it. Sometimes I think dining is all about how the food appears to you. So you want to make something that looks nice as well as tastes great. So here's what it looks like when I'm able to take it off of the tray. And I serve it just like this. It's got all these great vegetables inside and it's really terrific. Now you could add anything you want to it. There's a couple more vegetables I'll put on, and I'll put a little more sauce onto it. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some pickled red onions, a little guacamole, and a little sour cream. And I'll have a tremendous dish. And I've got lunch for tomorrow too, because there's plenty of them. So here's what it looks like when it's finished. What a beautiful dish. I think this is well composed. It's delicious. And like I said, you can spice it, change the vegetables, make it your own.